subscribe to the channel, and give this video a like so you don't miss our next stories. This is a tale of abandonment, regret, and a woman's quiet strength. We guarantee the ending will move you. The price of pride. I did not sign up for fatherhood. 3 years later, the billionaire CEO collapsed in the frozen snow of the Rockies, not from the cold, but because the two small girls staring up at him had his unmistakable cobalt blue eyes. Marcus Sterling had drafted thousands of documents in his life, multi-billion-dollar contracts, executive orders, ruthless terminations. But no note was as starkly efficient as the one he sent that winter morning. The words came easily, colder than the marble of his Manhattan office, and sharper than the pen that etched them onto the paper. He didn't reread the letter before sliding it into the envelope. He didn't hesitate when handing it to his assistant. He didn't even think about the woman who would unfold it with trembling fingers. For Marcus, it was just another task completed, an inconvenience resolved quickly and cleanly. He had no idea how deeply those words would resonate in the years to come. Clara Evans received the letter while sitting at the tiny kitchen table in her humble apartment in Boulder, Colorado. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting soft patterns on the worn linoleum. She had hoped, she had prayed for something different. Even a rejection delivered with confusion or fear would have been easier to accept. But when she opened the envelope and her eyes scanned the short, cutting lines, her breath caught painfully in her chest. "I did not sign up for fatherhood," he had written. No greeting, no explanation, no humanity. Just those words, polished, act, and final, severing her from him as ruthlessly as if he had cut a rope between them. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, though she wasn't far along yet. She could barely feel anything physical, but emotionally, the presence of the life within her overwhelmed her. She had imagined telling him in person. She imagined the surprise on his face would soften into something warmer. She imagined he would take responsibility, at least trying, to be part of something bigger than himself. But Marcus Sterling did not want something bigger. He wanted cleanliness, precision, control. She realized then that he had never truly seen her. She had been a pleasant distraction at best, a complication at worst. Clara sank to the floor, the letter slipping from her fingers. The tears rose, hot and unstoppable. It wasn't just the grief over the relationship she thought she had. It was the crushing fear of facing motherhood alone. She covered her face with her hands, trembling, unable to breathe through the knot of worry and humiliation that choked her. The apartment's silence wrapped around her tightly, as if mocking her for believing she could matter to someone like Marcus. Hours passed before she could stand again. She flattened the letter on the table, looking at every heartless stroke of his pen. Something inside her hardened, not into bitterness, but into resolution. If he wanted nothing to do with the child, then he would have nothing to do with either of them. She wouldn't beg him for support, wouldn't allow him to reappear later out of guilt, wouldn't raise her baby in the shadow of a man who had abandoned them before their life had begun. She folded the letter one last time, not carefully, but with the final bluntness it deserved, and tossed it into the trash. The next morning, she packed her belongings with unsteady hands. She left behind the few mementos of their time together. A framed photo, a forgotten scarf he had draped over her shoulders, a half-finished bottle of wine they planned to share. She didn't allow herself a single backward glance as she closed the apartment door. She boarded a bus with her suitcase and the growing weight of her unborn children. And as the city blurred behind her, she whispered a promise to the life inside her womb. "I will protect you, even if I have to protect you from him." She didn't know where she was going yet. She didn't know how she would manage. All she knew was that she couldn't stay. Not in the city where she had given her heart to a man who crushed it without a second thought. Not surrounded by reminders of the future she once believed in. That morning became the quiet beginning of a new life. One shaped not by Marcus's rejection, but by her determination to survive and give her children a world without his coldness darkening it. And as the bus carried her further and further away, Clara pressed her hand against her belly again. For the first time since opening the letter, she felt something other than pain. It wasn't hope, not yet, but the faint spark of strength. A strength she would need more than she could ever imagine. A new horizon. The Rockies. Clara's new life began on a southbound bus heading toward the Rockies, its windows fogged with the cold of May, its seats half empty. The ride was long and quiet, giving her too much time to think, but also enough to breathe without feeling the walls closing in. She had chosen the town almost at random. She found it in a faded brochure left in the seat pocket. A small place in Colorado called Evergreen Creek. Unremarkable, except that it was far from everything she needed to escape. When she stepped off the bus hours later, snowflakes clung to her lashes, and the winter air stung her lungs. But at least no one knew her here. At least no one expected anything from her. The town was peaceful in a way she hadn't realized she craved. Rows of small shops lined the main street, their windows filled with handmade decorations. A tiny bakery sent the scent of cinnamon into the air, and strings of festive lights hung from the lampposts, shining softly against the falling snow. It was the kind of place where people waved even when they didn't know you, where footsteps were the loudest sound on most nights, where time moved a little slower. She found a furnished room above the local bookstore, the reader's corner, a single bed, a wobbly table, and a radiator that clanked every hour, but it was warm, safe, and hers. She started working part-time at the town library within a week. The job didn't pay much, but she liked the quiet hum of the place. She liked the smell of old paper, the creak of the wooden floors, and the sense of being surrounded by stories much bigger than her own. The librarian, Mrs. Helen, was an older woman with a soft voice and a habit of offering everyone homemade cookies. She asked no questions about Clara's past. She simply smiled and said, "We're happy to have you here." It was more kindness than Clara expected from anyone. But as the weeks passed, her pregnancy became increasingly difficult to hide. The nausea came in waves, constant and persistent. Dizziness left her clutching the bookshelves until the room stopped spinning. One afternoon, she nearly fainted while stacking returned books, and Mrs. Helen gently insisted she take a break. They sat together at the library counter, and for the first time Clara admitted, not the details, but the truth. "I'm expecting," she whispered, bracing for judgment. Instead, the older woman's eyes softened. "Then you are not alone," she said simply. "Not anymore." It was the first time Clara cried since leaving the city. Do you believe a stranger's kindness can radically change the course of a life? Leave your comment below. The winter deepened, and with it came the reality of her pregnancy. She went to her first checkup at the tiny clinic on the edge of town. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with a calm presence, guided the ultrasound wand over Clara's belly. The room filled with static sounds before the monitor lit up, showing the faint outline of a tiny form. Clara held her breath, but before she could speak, the doctor frowned slightly and adjusted the screen. "Wait," she murmured. "There's something else here." Clara's pulse quickened. The doctor then smiled, warm and reassuring. "Congratulations, you're having twins." The word echoed in Clara's mind. Twins. 2 babies. 2 lives. 2 futures depending entirely on her. Shock washed over her first, followed by a fear so intense it nearly took the air from her lungs. But beneath it all, somewhere deep inside her, something else stirred. An instinctive, fierce love she had never felt before. She blinked at the monitor, tears blurring the two small silhouettes. The bus ride, the letter, the grief, all felt distant, suddenly dwarfed by the miraculous truth shining on the screen. She pressed a trembling hand against her belly, whispering silently to the tiny hearts beating inside her. She was not alone, not anymore. As her pregnancy progressed, life became a delicate balance of exhaustion, determination, and quiet hope. She bought second-hand baby clothes from the local charity shop, washing them late at night and folding them with trembling hands. She took nightly walks through the snowy streets, breathing the cold air and imagining what life would look like once the babies arrived. She started saving every penny she could, splitting her meals in half some days, skipping new clothes, working extra shifts at the library when Mrs. Helen allowed. Despite the challenges, the town slowly began to feel like home. People greeted her warmly. Neighbors brought her hot soup when the weather turned harsh. Children at the library showed her drawings and asked when her tiny little people would come. For the first time in months, she felt something firm beneath her feet. But the nights were still difficult. Loneliness crept in like cold wind through the window cracks. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, fighting off memories of Marcus. His piercing eyes, his confident smile, his voice saying words she couldn't forget. I did not sign up for fatherhood. She wondered if he ever thought about her. She wondered if he would have cared even a little if things had been different. But she pushed the thoughts away. She had no room left for him. Her life was now shaped by the two heartbeats inside her, not by the man who denied them. And on a particularly cold night, bundled in a thick blanket, she whispered into the silent room, I will do it. I will raise them. I will give them the life they deserve. She didn't know then how strong she would have to become. She didn't know how profoundly motherhood would change her. She didn't know that, across the mountains, the man who rejected her would one day regret it so fiercely that it would remake him too. For now, all she knew was that her new life had begun, and she was determined not to look back. Don't forget to subscribe if the story is gripping you. The CEO's crumble. Marcus Sterling had always believed he understood the architecture of his own life, its strengths, its weaknesses, its boundaries. He built his world on precision and control, shaping every minute of every day with the detached efficiency of someone who feared chaos more than solitude. For years, that structure had served him well. It had made him wealthy, respected, untouchable. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the flawless design began to crack. What started as small fractures, restless nights, inexplicable distractions, a certain heaviness he carried in his chest, grew into something bigger, something that made him question if the life he had built was truly the one he wanted to live. He first noticed the change about 6 months after sending Clara the letter. He couldn't explain what triggered it. Perhaps it was the silence that followed, a silence he expected to feel liberating, but which instead felt unnervingly empty. Perhaps it was the way his apartment in the sleek Upper East Side seemed colder than usual at night, or how the clank of his keys hitting the marble counter became the only sound to greet him when he came home. He tried to ignore it, burying himself in work, meetings, and responsibilities. He won awards, garnered investor praise, and appeared on the covers of business magazines. Yet each triumph left him feeling strangely hollow, as if the applause wasn't for him, but for a version of himself he no longer recognized. At first, he blamed it on stress. CEOs carried burdens no one else understood. He told himself he just needed rest, a brief vacation, another project, to ignite the thrill again. But nothing worked. When he sat in the boardroom surrounded by confident voices, his thoughts strayed unpredictably. He found himself distracted, unfocused, haunted by flashes of brown hair, warm laughter, gentle eyes. Clara's presence lingered in the corners of his memory, an unwelcome ghost that refused to leave. He wouldn't admit to himself that he missed her. He wouldn't admit that her leaving felt like something stolen, a loss so sharp it scraped at old wounds he didn't even realize he had. Instead, he became irritable and unpredictable. His employees noticed his temper shortening, his patience wearing thin. He gave harsh feedback for minor errors, only to feel an unusual pang of guilt hours later. His assistant learned to tread carefully, offering coffee at the perfect temperature and remaining silent unless spoken to. One night, after a tense meeting that left him unusually shaken, Marcus returned to an apartment lit only by the distant glow of the city outside his windows. He stood there without turning on the lights, watching small headlights crawl along the streets far below. For the first time, he felt small in the very space intended to make him feel powerful. The silence felt heavier than usual, almost suffocating. When he finally moved, it was only to open a drawer and pull out the old keychain Clara had once bought him. A cheap, silly thing shaped like a lighthouse, a small joke between them because he once admitted he hated the ocean. He stared at it for a long time, tracing its chipped paint with his thumb. He hadn't thought about the story behind it in months, but now the memory rushed back. It was the first gift she gave him, when their connection was still new, warm, and full of possibility. He remembered the look on her face when she handed it over, playful yet hopeful, as if she feared he wouldn't understand the gesture. Has a small object ever brought back a memory so strongly that it paralyzed you? Tell us your experience. He tried to dismiss these thoughts, but they persisted. They filtered into his dreams, turning restful nights into restless ones, where Clara's face would appear only to blur and fade before he could reach her. He started waking up in the middle of the night with the unsettling sense that he had missed something important, something irreversible. By the end of the first year, denial was no longer enough. He found himself searching for traces of her on social media. Nothing. He asked acquaintances discreetly if they had heard from her. No one. The city was large enough for a person to disappear completely without a trace. But the silence bothered him more each day. By the end of the second year, guilt began to crystallize. He replayed the words of his letter in his mind, no matter how much he tried to silence them. I did not sign up for fatherhood. The phrase had felt practical at the time, an explanation of the boundaries he thought he needed. Now it sounded cruel, childish, cowardly. Unbidden, he began to imagine different versions of that moment. What if he had asked her what she needed? What if he had listened? What if he had cared? Every alternative choice led to a future he didn't have. He didn't know why the idea of her carrying his child terrified him at first. Perhaps because he feared the responsibility. Perhaps because he feared repeating his own father's mistakes. But now that fear twisted into something else. Regret, longing, and the penetrating realization that he had rejected something irreplaceable. By the third year, avoiding the truth was impossible. Marcus found himself staring at an empty chair in his penthouse more often than he liked to admit. He found himself pausing near the baby clothes aisle in department stores, feeling foolish, but unable to look away. He found himself imagining Clara holding a child. His child. Alone. Tired. Scared. Determined. and the image shattered him every time. It was during one of these nights, after a particularly painful dream, that he made the decision. He sat at his desk long after midnight, fingers laced together, determination hardening inside him with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He was going to find her, even if it took months, even if it cost him everything he had. He wasn't looking for redemption. He wasn't sure he deserved it. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. He doubted she would ever grant it. He was looking because the truth felt unbearable, because not knowing had become a punishment, because somewhere a piece of him might exist without him having known it. And this time, he wouldn't turn away. Remember to like the video if you think Marcus deserves a second chance. The trail in the snow. It took Marcus 3 months of relentless searching before he found the first thread that didn't fray in his hands. By then, he had gone through 3 private investigation teams, dozens of dead ends, and more sleepless nights than he could count. His days became a cycle of board meetings, where his mind wandered, and late nights devoted to reviewing reports, addresses, and vague witness statements. Each time he got close, the trail dissolved. It was as if Clara had predicted his search and deliberately erased every trace she had left. But on a frosty August morning, when the 3rd investigation firm called with a hesitant note in their voice, he felt something stir deep in his chest, something dangerously close to hope. An old co-worker of Clara's had recognized her from an old photo and mentioned she had left the city suddenly years ago, heading south toward Colorado. It was vague, imprecise, but it was more than anything he had received before. Marcus canceled his afternoon meetings, sent a concise message to his assistant that he would be unreachable, and began personally sorting through every southern town, every address, every hiring record, within a 300-mile radius. He had never worked so obsessively on anything that didn't involve billions of dollars, and the weight of that truth was not lost on him. Clara had become his priority in a way nothing else had been. Weeks passed before another clue surfaced, a blurred security photo from a grocery store miles away in a small town in Chubut, Evergreen Creek. The investigator wasn't even sure it was her, but Marcus knew instantly. There was something about the tilt of her head, the cautious way she held the shopping basket, the familiar curve of her profile. He stared at the image long enough for the investigator to shift uncomfortably beside him. He didn't look away. When he finally looked up, his voice was firm. "Find the town. Find every place she could be living. I'll handle the rest." And he did. He didn't send assistants or bodyguards. He drove himself. The journey took hours, the landscape gradually transforming as he left the city behind. Skyscrapers gave way to forests of bare timber. The roads narrowed and wound as the snow began to fall in thicker flakes. The farther he drove, the tighter his chest constricted with anticipation and fear. He had rehearsed a dozen scenarios. Her slamming the door in his face, her refusing to speak to him, her having completely moved on. But none of his imagined outcomes eased the turmoil inside him. He was prepared for none of it. He reached the small town at dusk. The streets were lined with quaint lampposts wrapped in white lights. Children pulled sleds behind them, bundled in coats so puffy they looked like walking snowballs. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the air. Everything looked soft, peaceful, untouched by the chaos he carried with him. Marcus felt completely out of place in his expensive coat and polished shoes, but he ignored the stares of the passers-by as he walked down the main street. He visited every location the investigator had listed. A grocery store clerk vaguely recalled a woman matching Clara's description, but couldn't remember when she was last there. The librarian at the town bookstore didn't recognize the photo, though she conceded new faces were common during the holidays. At a small diner, an older waitress studied the photo for a long time before nodding slowly and saying, "She comes in sometimes, quiet, polite, very sweet, usually with two little girls. Two little girls. The words hit him like a punch. Marcus sat down abruptly at the counter, unable to stand for a moment, as the world spun in slow, disorienting circles. He had prepared for the possibility of a child. But hearing about two children, two little girls, who might have his eyes, his laugh, his smile, shook him in a way he couldn't describe. He pressed a hand to his forehead, forcing himself to breathe as the waitress continued talking. "They're precious little things," she added fondly. "Blonde hair, big blue eyes, just like their mama. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Twins." There was no room for doubt. They were his daughters, and he had never seen them. The weight of it pressed so hard it burned his chest. He thanked the waitress in a strained voice and stumbled outside into the cold. The snow was falling steadily, settling on his hair and coat, and he let it numb him. Only when he felt he could control his breathing again did he continue searching. Following another lead, he walked to a small park near the edge of town. Pine trees ringed the space like silent guardians, and a frozen pond glittered under the moonlight. He paused near a wooden bench and looked at the empty swing swaying gently in the wind. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the stillness settle over him. He imagined Clara here with two little girls, laughing as snowflakes fell in their hair. He imagined their voices echoing in the cold air, their tiny footprints marking the ground. It was an image so vivid it hurt. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry. Silent tears disappearing into the snow before anyone could see them. He wept for the birthdays he had missed, for the nights she had cried alone, for the cruelty of his letter, for the father he hadn't been, for the man he had been back then. When he finally opened his eyes, everything inside him was different. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow, I will find her. Tomorrow, I will see them. And no matter how she looks at me, no matter how much she hates me, I won't run away again. Not from her, not from them, not from the truth I should have embraced years ago. The encounter, Clara bundled the twins into their winter coats, winding soft scarves around their little necks and pulling mittens over their tiny hands. Emma wriggled impatiently, buzzing with excitement as she always did, before going outside, while Eliza stood still and waited quietly, her bright blue eyes watching her mother with a gentleness that made Clara's heart ache. It had snowed all night and piled up in glittering drifts along the park paths. It was the kind of morning that made the world look soft and magical, as if everything painful had been buried beneath the white. She needed that illusion of peace. After another sleepless night filled with uneasy dreams and sharp memories, she felt fragile. She wanted fresh air. She wanted her daughters to laugh. She wanted to pretend for a moment that nothing could hurt them. So she took them to the park, their favorite spot, where they could build snowmen and chase each other around the benches. The moment they arrived, Emma shrieked with delight and plunged into the snow, kicking it up into the air. Eliza giggled softly and followed, holding her mother's hand before releasing it to join her sister. Clara exhaled, watching them play, her breath forming clouds that drifted away in the frigid air. She sat on the wooden bench and rubbed her gloved hands, feeling the cold slowly seep into her bones. For several minutes, the world was quiet. The twins ran in circles, their voices bright and musical. The sun peeked through the scattered clouds, catching in their blonde hair and making them sparkle. Clara closed her eyes briefly, trying to hold on to the moment. Then, footsteps crunched behind her. Slow, steady, too deliberate to be a casual passerby. She opened her eyes and turned her head. Her breath hitched. Marcus Sterling was only a few feet away. He looked nothing like the immaculate executive she once knew. His hair was tousled by the wind, his coat dusted with snowflakes, his cheeks flushed with the cold. But his eyes, those penetrating blue eyes, held something she had never seen in them before. Something raw, something wounded, something desperate. Clara felt her stomach twist painfully. She stood up as if a jolt of electricity had shot through her. "What are you doing here?" Her voice cracked, though she tried to make it firm. Marcus swallowed hard, his breath visible in the air as he exhaled slowly. "I found you." The word hit her like a blast of freezing wind, and she instinctively stepped between him and the girls. Emma and Eliza were still playing, unaware of the storm unfolding behind them. "You need to leave." Clara tried to keep her voice even, though fear made her pulse race. "Right now." He shook his head slowly. "I won't leave, not until I talk to you." His gaze flickered briefly toward the twins, and Clara saw something break in him, something deep and profoundly painful. "Not until I understand." Her breath caught, but she wouldn't let him see her falter. "There's nothing to understand. You made it perfectly clear 3 years ago." The reminder cut him. She could see it. His expression tightened, and he looked down for a moment as if steeling himself. "I know what I said. I know how cruel it was. I've replayed it every day since." Clara wanted to scream that repeating it wasn't enough. That repeating it didn't uncry the nights she wept, the months she struggled alone, the terror she felt at every uncertain moment of the pregnancy, the sleepless nights raising 2 babies by herself. She wanted to tell him that his regret couldn't erase 3 years of abandonment. But she didn't trust herself to speak without breaking down. So she said, "You shouldn't be here." Marcus looked up then, and she was startled by the amount of anguish swirling in his eyes. "I had to see you. I had to see them. Clara, please." A small voice interrupted him. Emma had turned around. She froze mid-kick, her snow-covered mittens still in the air. "Mommy, who is that?" Clara's heart hammered violently. She looked at Marcus, terrified, because this was the moment she had prayed would never come. Before she could answer, Marcus backed up, holding up his hands as if trying not to scare anyone. His voice softened, cracking slightly. "Hello." Eliza ran to her sister's side, tilting her head in curiosity. "Mommy, why is that man sad?" Clara's throat constricted. Marcus looked devastated, unable to tear his gaze away from the girls. He blinked rapidly, as if forcing himself not to cry. He hesitated, then looked at Clara with a pleading expression. "Are they?" Clara set her jaw. "Yes." Marcus inhaled sharply. His knees almost buckled. He pressed a hand to his mouth, and a broken sound escaped him. A mixture of disbelief and anguish. For a moment, Clara's anger softened despite everything. Because seeing him silently crumble at the sight of his children, she realized something she had never expected. He hadn't been ready for fatherhood 3 years ago, but he wasn't absolutely prepared for this moment either. Emma bravely stepped forward. "Why are you crying?" she asked, her voice full of innocent concern. Marcus slowly knelt. So slowly it seemed his legs might give out. He wiped his face with the back of his glove and whispered, "Because I'm happy to see you." Clara felt her world tilt. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for him. But the twins, pure of heart, curious, unburdened by the past, approached him. Eliza's little fingers curled around Clara's coat, but she didn't hide. Emma walked openly toward him with fearless curiosity. Clara exhaled shakily, fighting the flood of emotions rising in her chest. This was the moment she feared. This was the moment she wanted to freeze and run from all at once. Marcus looked at her, his eyes filled with a plea she couldn't decipher. "Please," he said softly. "Just give me a chance to explain." Clara looked at him, at her daughters, at the snow gently swirling around them, and felt her whole life shifting beneath her feet. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. But she didn't leave either. The promise of rebuilding. Clara didn't sleep that night. Even after tucking the girls in, even after the house fell into a deep winter silence, her mind refused to stop spinning. She sat at the small kitchen table with an untouched cup of tea, staring at the faint ring of frost forming along the window pane. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus kneeling in the snow, tears on his face, looking at his daughters as if the ground had shifted beneath him. She hated the way that image softened something in her. She hated that a part of her still cared. She hated that the past wouldn't stay buried as she wanted it to. Meanwhile, across town, in a hotel room far too luxurious for the quiet little town, Marcus lay awake on crisp white sheets, staring at the ceiling and reliving the moment he saw the twins. It felt as if his heart had shattered, exposing every fragile, aching part of him he had tried to lock away. He had spent 3 years looking for Clara, regretting what he had done, imagining how he would fix it. But the moment he saw the twins, the regret turned into something deeper, heavier, almost unbearable. This was no longer about the past. It was about the 3 years of their lives he had missed. The birthdays, the first steps, the late-night fevers, the first words. It had all happened without him, and the knowledge hollowed him out. The next morning, Clara tried to stick to her routine, pretending nothing had changed. She dressed the girls, made oatmeal, and braided their hair, but her hands were shaking, and her voice kept cracking when she reminded them to put on their boots. The twins sensed her tension, even if they didn't understand it. Emma asked if the sad man would be at the park again. Eliza quietly wondered if he needed help. Clara felt something twist inside her. Her daughters had never known rejection. They had never known cruelty. They had never known the coldness she had experienced the day she read that letter. They saw kindness first, always. She wanted to protect that innocence, but she also knew she couldn't hide Marcus's existence forever. Not after yesterday. Not after the way he had looked at them. Not after the way the girls had naturally gravitated toward him. She tried to convince herself it would be better if he simply left. But deep down, she knew he wouldn't. Not now. And she wasn't sure she wanted him to. That truth scared her more than anything. When she finally stepped outside with the twins bundled in their coats, she wasn't surprised to see Marcus standing near the end of her walkway. He didn't dress like a CEO today. He wore a simple jacket, jeans, and gloves. He looked older than she remembered, tired, quieter, stripped of the arrogant confidence he once carried. He stood at a respectful distance, as if he feared any closer step would make her flee. "I didn't mean to ambush you," he said softly. "I just needed to know you were okay." Clara let out a shaky breath. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he admitted, "but I'm here anyway." Eliza peered out from behind Clara's coat, tilting her head with the same soft curiosity she had shown yesterday. Emma stared openly, without fear. Marcus crouched down so as not to tower over them. Clara felt her heart lurch at the gesture. "Hello again," he murmured, offering a tentative smile. "I'm Marcus." Emma frowned. "That's a short name." He let out a surprised breath of laughter. "It is, isn't it? Eliza stepped a little closer. "Why were you crying yesterday?" Clara's breath caught. She waited, tense, ready to intervene if he said the wrong thing. Marcus's expression softened in a way Clara had never seen before. Gentle, vulnerable, ashamed. "Because," he said quietly, "I saw something very special, and I realized how much I had missed." Emma blinked. "What did you miss?" He swallowed hard, looking at Clara before looking back at the twins. "A lot. More than I can ever fix." Clara felt the sting of tears behind her eyes. She didn't want him to soften her. She didn't want her heart to remember the man she once cared for. But seeing him like this, humble, hurt, trying. It broke the walls she had spent years reinforcing. "Girls," Clara said softly, "why don't you go play for a little bit?" Emma grabbed her sister's hand and pulled her toward a snowdrift. Clara watched them run before turning back to Marcus. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't hesitate. "A chance." She almost laughed, bitter, exhausted, incredulous. "A chance for what?" "To know them." He inhaled deeply. "To be their father. And if you'll allow me, to make things right with you." Clara shook her head, looking at him with raw pain. "You didn't want to be a father. You made that perfectly clear." Marcus's shoulders slumped. "I was terrified. I was selfish. And I was stupid. I thought rejecting the responsibility would protect me from becoming my father. Instead, I became him." The confession made Clara's breath catch. She hadn't known this part of him. She hadn't known any part of him that deeply. "I can't undo what I did," he continued quietly. "But I can change who I am now. And I have, Clara. I've been trying to become someone worthy of being in their lives. Someone who won't run away again." Clara closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe never. But she couldn't deny the truth. Her heart reluctantly whispered, people could change. She had changed. Maybe he had too. When she opened her eyes, Marcus was looking at her with a mix of hope and desperation. "I'm not asking for forgiveness today," he said gently. "I'm asking for a chance to earn it." Clara looked at the twins, their laughter rising into the cold air. The sight of them, two bright, beautiful girls who deserve the world, guided her. "You can see them," she said slowly. "For now, just see them." The relief that washed over Marcus's face almost shattered her. He whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't a pardon. It wasn't a promise. It was a beginning. A fragile, terrifying, but necessary beginning. The spring of family. Marcus returned every day after that. Never uninvited, never unannounced, but always careful, always gentle. Always aware that he was stepping into a life already constructed without him. Clara kept her distance at first, standing with her arms crossed and her eyes watchful, observing every interaction between him and the twins, as if ready to intervene at the slightest hint of discomfort. But to her surprise, though she would never admit it aloud, Marcus adapted to fatherhood with a sincerity and a tenderness she never imagined he possessed. The first time he read to them, he stumbled over the voices, trying to differentiate characters, while Emma loudly corrected him and Eliza giggled behind her hands. He tried again and again until the twins finally collapsed against him in laughter and told him he wasn't so bad anymore. Clara watched from the doorway, her arms relaxing just a little, her heart aching with something complicated and unstable. He quickly learned their preferences. Emma liked sandwiches cut into triangles. Eliza preferred squares. Emma loved adventure books. Eliza preferred stories about animals. Both hated scratchy scarves. Both loved hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. And both adored sledding, something Marcus had never done in his adult life. He threw himself into it anyway, landing face first in the snow so dramatically that the girls shrieked with delight and demanded he do it again. Clara watched from the bench, trying not to smile, failing every time he deliberately pretended to lose his balance just to make the girls squeal. Comment below if you think it's important for parents to own up to past mistakes. Yet, beneath the laughter, beneath the warmth, there was always a silent tension between Clara and Marcus. They rarely spoke of the past, but it hovered between them like a shadow. Marcus sought not to erase it, but to show through action what words could never mend. He arrived early for every meeting with the girls, brought snacks, bought them warm gloves after noticing their old ones were thinning, and never complained when the weather turned brutally cold. He simply showed up, consistent and present, as if trying to reconstruct 3 lost years, one careful moment at a time. One afternoon, after a long day of sledding, the twins fell asleep in Clara's living room, tangled in the rug under a blanket. Marcus knelt beside them, brushing a lock of hair from Eliza's forehead with a reverence that made Clara swallow hard. When he stood up again, he found her looking at him, her expression indecipherable in the dim light. "They are incredible," he whispered. "You did an amazing job with them." Clara looked away, her eyes softening. "They are my everything." "I can see that," he said. "And I'm grateful you let me be here now. More grateful than I know how to express." She opened her mouth, and then closed it again. There was too much inside her. Anger, fear, affection, confusion, twisting into knots she couldn't untangle. Instead, she said quietly, "You are trying. I see that." "I will keep trying." His eyes flashed with something akin to relief. Some days were easier. Others reopened old wounds. There were moments when Clara caught him looking at the twins with a mixture of awe and regret, so raw that she had to turn away. There were moments when she snapped back, and he accepted her anger without defending himself. There were moments when the twins asked questions she wasn't ready for. Why did he live far away? Why wasn't he always here? Why did we never meet him before? Each question cut sharply, but Marcus answered them with a gentleness she didn't expect. He spoke the truth carefully, that he had made mistakes, big mistakes, that he wished he could undo, but that he was here now because he loved them more than anything in the world. Clara listened from the hallway, tears burning in her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. One afternoon, Emma scraped her knee on the ice. Instinctively, she ran to Clara first, but when Clara pointed to Marcus and murmured, "Daddy can help too," Emma hesitated only a second before turning to him. Marcus froze, as if he feared the moment wasn't real. He knelt, checked her knee, and placed a small, uncertain, trembling kiss on her forehead. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy." The word hit him like a wave. Clara saw his face break, saw his breath catch, saw his hands tremble as he hugged his daughter tighter. He didn't cry, not fully, but tears glistened in his eyes as he held her close. Clara had to turn away, or she would have completely crumbled. With every passing week, the walls between them shifted. They didn't fall down. Not yet. But they cracked enough to let warmth through. Clara found herself talking to him more about the girls, about her work, about small things she never thought to share with him. Marcus listened intently, never interrupting, never trying to dominate the conversation as he once did. He seemed to study her, silently absorbing every detail as if memorizing the shape of her life. And sometimes, when their eyes met unexpectedly, something old and unfinished just flickered between them. Something neither of them dared to name. But it wasn't all smooth. One night, after tucking the girls in, Clara and Marcus lingered in the kitchen, the silence heavier than usual. Marcus leaned against the counter, his hands shaking slightly. Clara knew he was gathering courage before he spoke. "I have to ask," he said at last, his voice low. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara stiffened. The old pain surged quickly, sharp as the day she read his letter. "Because you told me I wasn't worth your time. Because you made it perfectly clear you didn't want a child, let alone 2. He winced, but didn't argue. I know what I wrote. I live with it every day. But if I had known..." She cut him off sharply. "You don't have the right to say that." He closed his eyes, exhaling, shakily. "You're right." The admission disarmed her. For a moment, she didn't know how to breathe. When he looked at her again, his expression was raw. "I'm not asking you to justify anything. I just wanted to understand how much I hurt you." Clara swallowed hard. "More than you can imagine." Their eyes held, two people entangled in the wreckage of what they once were, both terrified of what they might become. Marcus nodded slowly. "Then let me spend the rest of my life trying to ensure I never hurt you again." Clara's breath trembled, her heart painfully pounding. But she didn't flee from the promise echoing in his voice. She didn't accept it either. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, "We'll see." And for the first time, the uncertainty between them didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. The awakening spring arrived slowly in the small town, melting the snowdrifts layer by layer and revealing patches of muddy grass beneath. The long winter had made everyone restless, especially the twins, who were eager to trade sleds for bikes and snowmen for sidewalk chalk. Clara felt her routine shift too. The sun lingered longer each day, streaming through her curtains in soft gold instead of icy blue. And with each new morning, she found herself breathing a little easier. The heaviness she had carried for years didn't vanish, but it softened enough for hope to filter through. And Marcus, unexpectedly, impossibly, became part of that new rhythm. He didn't push. He didn't overwhelm. Instead, he adapted his life to theirs, not the other way around. He moved out of his hotel and rented a modest townhouse 5 minutes away. He replaced his sleek designer coats with warm jackets, more suitable for long walks in muddy parks. He restructured his work schedule, handing over responsibilities he once obsessively guarded, and began splitting his time between New York and the town. Every choice felt deliberate, grounded, humble. He wasn't trying to impress Clara. He was trying to show her with quiet consistency that he intended to stay. The twins welcomed him with the fierce openness only children possess. Emma began insisting he push her on the swing higher than anyone dared, while Eliza clung to his hand when she felt shy around strangers. They drew him pictures, crooked hearts, messy stick figures, flowers of impossible colors. And he took every single one home, carefully taping them to the walls of his previously immaculate office. His life, formerly built on clean lines and solitude, now brimmed with crayons, small mittens, and the chaotic joy of two little girls who had no idea how much space they had carved in his heart. But the relationship between him and Clara grew in quieter steps, cautious little moments that slowly overlapped, like sediment forming a new foundation after a storm. Some afternoons, they walked together while the girls chased ahead. They talked about small things at first: the library, the weather, the girls' upcoming birthdays. Gradually, however, the conversations deepened. Marcus learned how scared Clara had been during her pregnancy, how lonely the first months of motherhood were, how fiercely she fought to give the twins a life full of warmth, despite how exhausted she was. Clara learned how broken Marcus's relationship with his own father had been, how paralyzing the fear of repeating that cycle felt, how deeply he regretted the decisions he had made years ago. They rushed nothing between them. Clara still guarded her heart, and Marcus respected her boundaries with a patience he once didn't believe himself capable of. But anyone watching them from afar could see the difference. The way she no longer stiffened when he was beside her, the way he no longer seemed afraid to reach for the future, the way their glances lingered a little too long when the twins weren't looking. The turning point came on a warm October afternoon during the twins' 5th birthday celebration. Marcus had insisted on helping plan the small party in the backyard, and Clara reluctantly agreed. Together, they decorated the yard with pastel balloons and a banner the girls had painted themselves. A few neighbors came, bringing cookies and small gifts, and the children ran happily. Emma and Eliza were radiant in matching dresses, their cheeks flushed with laughter, their hands sticky with frosting. Near the end of the party, as the sun set, casting everything in a soft gold. Emma tugged Marcus toward the center of the yard. "Daddy!" she yelled, her voice clear and bright enough to make the entire group fall silent. "Make a wish with us!" The word resonated. Daddy. And Clara, standing a few feet away, felt something inside her burst open. She saw the way Marcus froze for a single heartbeat. She saw the way his eyes glistened. She saw the way his shoulders trembled before he slowly and reverently knelt, pulling the twins close. "Okay," he whispered, his voice tight. "Let's make a wish." Clara watched in silence, her heart a storm of memories and new beginnings. There was a time when that word, Daddy, would have felt like a wound. Now it felt like a healing. When the candles were blown out and applause filled the yard, Clara stepped aside to collect stray plates. Marcus approached her softly, his expression gentle, hopeful, uncertain. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, "for letting me be a part of this." She nodded. Unable to trust her voice, "Clara," he continued, the quiet seriousness in his tone drawing her eyes to his. "There's something I want to ask you, something I've wanted to say for a long time, but I didn't feel ready until now." Her breath hitched. The noise of the backyard faded into a distant hum. He took a small step closer, not touching her, not demanding, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I know I can never change the past. I know I hurt you deeply, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never hurt you again. But these months, being here with you, with them, have made me realize something. I don't want to be part of their lives only in pieces. I want to build an entire life with you." Her heart pounded in her ears. "Marcus!" He shook his head, gently stopping her before she could pull away. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm not asking for overnight forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed, to prove I can be the partner you deserved back then, to prove I can be the father they deserve every single day." Clara looked at him. Every memory, good, painful, beautiful, rushed through her at once. She looked at the twins laughing across the garden. She looked at Marcus standing before her with a sincerity that shook her to the core. She looked at her own hands, hands that had carried so much burden alone. And finally, she allowed herself to say the truth she had been afraid to feel. "You're already proving it," she whispered. Every day, his breath hitched, relief flooding his face. He didn't touch her, didn't press for more. He simply nodded, slow, reverent, grateful. In that moment, Clara realized something. Healing wasn't a single moment of forgiveness. It was 1,000 tiny choices made every day. It was trust, carefully earned. It was love rebuilt like a house after a storm, stronger because of everything it survived. Weeks later, the four of them were together in the same park where everything had begun. The snow had melted, replaced by wildflowers, timidly blooming along the path. Emma and Eliza ran ahead, weaving through the new blossoms. Marcus offered her his hand, not demanding, not assuming, just offering. Clara looked at it. Then she took it, not because she had forgotten the past, but because she finally believed in the future. And as they walked forward, fingers entwined, the twins' laughter echoing in the spring air, Clara understood something she never expected to feel again. They had not only survived the pain, they had built something beautiful from it. Something whole, something healing, something entirely theirs. A family finally complete. Conclusion and call to action. This story teaches us that true repentance is not shown with words, but with consistent actions over time. Marcus had to lose everything to realize that control was less valuable than connection. Clara had to find her strength before she could consider a new path. What would you do in Clara's place? Would you forgive such a cruel rejection? Leave your opinion in the comments. If this story of redemption and enduring love moved you, share this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories.